October 17th. The sea is calm. Deep beneath the turbulent surface of the water, in the cold, crushing blackness off the coast of the peninsula, a serpent of steel and copper rests in the silt. This is cable line K-12. It is more than a wire. It is a central nervous system, an artery of command connecting the nerve center of the Black Sea Fleet to its most powerful instruments of war, the nuclear submarine pins nestled in the granite cliffs of the southern coast. Through this armored conduit flows the lifeblood of state power. It carries the coded whispers of admirals, the targeting data for long-range missiles, the authentication sequences for nuclear weapons. Its integrity is not a technical specification. It is an article of faith. On this day, that faith begins to die. Inside a concrete bunker, buried deep within the earth of the naval headquarters, a technician stares at his console. He is a young man, barely 20, but he knows the sounds of his system. He knows the hum of the amplifiers, the gentle hiss of a clear line, the specific electrical signature of K-12. Today, that signature is different. It is not broken. It is not noisy. In fact, it is the opposite. It is perfect. Too perfect. The line has always carried a ghost. A faint, residual noise floor, an infinitesimal echo created by the powerful signals interacting with the thousands of tons of seawater and the planet's own magnetic field. It was a known variable, a constant factored into every transmission. Now it is gone. The line is clean. It is unnaturally, impossibly clean. The silence is louder than any alarm. He runs a diagnostic. The system reports all functions are nominal. Signal strength is 100%. Data packet transmission shows zero loss. According to the machine, the line is healthier than it has ever been. The technician calls his superior. The superior, a gruff officer with 20 years of service, dismisses it as a new filter installed at the submarine base. An undocumented upgrade. He tells the boy to stop wasting his time. But the boy cannot shake the feeling. It is the feeling of being in a familiar room where a single piece of furniture has been moved a few inches. Everything looks right, but the entire space feels wrong. He sends a low-priority test packet, a meaningless string of data, to the submarine base. The reply comes back instantly. Perfect handshake. Perfect data integrity. Yet, something is missing. The faint electrical sigh of the signal traveling through the deep ocean is absent. It is as if the signal did not travel at all. It is as if it simply appeared. He picks up the handset for the voice channel, a line reserved for critical command communication. He listens. He hears nothing. Not the faint crackle of static, not the whisper of the amplifiers. He hears absolute, digital, sterile silence. It feels like listening to a dead man. The line is working. The machine says the line is working. But his instincts scream that the line is a corpse. Panic begins to prickle at the edges of his professional calm. What is it? How can a system be both perfect and wrong? He stares at the signal waveform on his oscilloscope. It is a perfect, beautiful sine wave, exactly as the textbook says it should be. It is a work of art. But the sea is not a textbook. The real world is noisy, imperfect, chaotic. This perfection is a lie. This perfection is a monster. He picks up the phone to his superior again, his voice trembling slightly. "Sir," he says, "something is listening." The line on the other end is silent for a long moment. Then, the officer's voice, now laced with ice. "Who is this?" The investigation had begun. The impossible event on October 17th was not a bang. It was a whisper. It was the sudden, inexplicable absence of noise on a communication line that should have been noisy. For the vast security apparatus of the Union, this was a problem far more terrifying than a severed cable. A cut cable is an act of war, a clear and understandable event. This was something else. This was witchcraft. This was a violation of the laws of physics as they understood them. And it was happening on the single most sensitive communications artery in the entire Southern Strategic Theater. The initial incident report, filed by the young technician and reluctantly escalated by his superior, lands on a desk in the Capitol. It is read by a man in a gray suit in a gray office in the headquarters of the Directorate, the state's shield and sword. The report is almost dismissed as paranoia, an overactive imagination. But the Directorate did not achieve its power through dismissal. It thrived on paranoia. An order is dispatched. A special technical team is to be sent to the peninsula. Their mission: find the source of the silence. The incident is now elevated. It is no longer a localized technical glitch. It is a potential strategic breach. The implications begin to metastasize within the halls of the High Command. Line K-12 carries the daily operational orders for the entire submarine fleet. It carries the readiness status of their nuclear deterrent. If that line is compromised, then the Union's most powerful weapon system is deaf, dumb, and blind. Or worse, it is speaking to the enemy. The core military doctrine of the Union is built on a foundation of secure, centralized command and control. From the top of the pyramid, orders flow downwards with absolute authority and absolute secrecy. The entire structure is designed to move as one monolithic entity, directed by a single will. This doctrine relies, utterly, on the assumption that the lines of communication are inviolable. K-12's unnatural perfection does not just threaten a piece of hardware. It threatens to invalidate the entire philosophy of how the Union fights a war. If the enemy can listen to the central nervous system, they can predict every move. They can anticipate every command. The monolithic giant becomes a predictable puppet, its strings pulled by an invisible master. The geopolitical stakes are immense. The balance of power in the world rests on a knife's edge, a delicate equilibrium of mutually assured destruction. The Union's credibility as a superpower is guaranteed by its second strike capability, the promise that its submarine-based nuclear weapons will survive a first strike and deliver a devastating response. This capability is coordinated through command lines like K-12. A compromised line means a compromised deterrent. A compromised deterrent means the entire strategic equation has been rewritten in the enemy's favor. The Union is suddenly playing poker with an opponent who can see their cards. The nation's security, its industrial might, its global standing, all of it is now held hostage by a whisper in the deep. On the peninsula itself, the atmosphere begins to sour. Rumors, like spores, are carried on the air from the command bunker to the submarine pens. The official explanation is a series of rolling upgrades to the communications grid. But the sailors and technicians know better. They see the teams of grim-faced men from the capital crawling all over their equipment. They see the patrol boats making endless, methodical sweeps over the cable route. They hear the divers speaking in hushed tones about the Deaf Sea. Fear takes root. A mythology begins to form around the anomaly. The sailors call it the ghost. They say the line is haunted. Some of the older, more superstitious men claim it is the hungry spirit of the Black Sea itself, angry at the intrusion of man's technology. The younger technicians, raised on a diet of science fiction, whisper of a new kind of weapon, an energy beam, a psychic probe. Paranoia becomes the new operational standard. Every order is double-checked. Voice communications become clipped and terse. No one wants to talk on a line that might be a direct conduit to the enemy. The silence that started in the cable now spreads to the men. The once cohesive fleet begins to fracture under the psychological strain of an enemy they cannot see, cannot hear, and cannot comprehend. The machine was now writing itself into their minds. The Directorate's mobilization is swift and absolute. The problem of Line K-12 is assigned the highest priority. It is codenamed Operation Maelstrom. The name is ironic. The problem is not a storm of noise, but a terrifying void of it. The Union's finest minds are brought to bear. Signal intelligence experts, physicists, marine engineers, and cryptographers are assembled into a task force. They are given a simple, impossible order: find the ghost. The first phase is a brute force search. The full weight of the Black Sea Fleet is used to sanitize the cable's environment. Minesweepers, equipped with sensitive magnetic anomaly detectors, trace the cable's path from the shore to the abyssal plain. They are hunting for the magnetic signature of a submarine, a remote-operated vehicle, or any piece of foreign hardware. The printouts show nothing. They show the magnetic ghost of the cable itself, lying on the seabed, and nothing more. Next, they deploy acoustic assets. A web of sophisticated hydrophones is laid on the seafloor around the cable. They listen for the telltale sound of a nuclear submarine's reactor pump, the whine of an electric motor, the click of a manipulator arm. The ocean is a symphony of noise, the songs of whales, the grinding of tectonic plates, the drone of distant merchant shipping. The analysts listen to this symphony for weeks. They hear nothing out of the ordinary. The ghost is silent. The investigation turns to the cable itself. Midget submarines, crewed by the bravest men in the special forces, are sent down into the crushing dark. Their powerful searchlights cut through the gloom, illuminating a world of strange fish and drifting sediment. They follow the thick, armored cable meter by painful meter. They are looking for a scar, a clamp, a splice, any physical sign of tampering. The cable is pristine. Its hardened steel armor is untouched. It rests in the silt, impassive and inert. The ghost has left no footprints. While the fleet searches the sea, the engineers search the signal. They hook up their most advanced analyzers to the line. They pore over reams of data, looking at the signal on a quantum level. The contradictions are maddening. The signal arrives with no discernible time lag distortion, as if it has passed through a perfect vacuum instead of 60 miles of copper and seawater. The signal-to-noise ratio is impossibly high, better than the theoretical maximum for the cable's design. It is like pointing a telescope at a distant star and seeing it with no atmospheric distortion whatsoever. It defies the known laws of information theory. Terrified survivors are debriefed. Except there are no survivors. There has been no attack. The technicians who first noticed the anomaly are questioned for days by directorate interrogators. Their stories are consistent. The line works perfectly. Too perfectly. They are cleared of any wrongdoing, but their careers are forever tainted by their association with the impossible. The directorate, unable to find an external enemy, begins to look inward. The paranoia deepens. The evidence they gather only deepens the mystery. One analyst discovers a faint energy pattern, a series of microfluctuations in the power supply to the line's amplifiers. The fluctuations are infinitesimally small, previously dismissed as random line noise. But when plotted over time, they seem to correlate with periods of high-priority message traffic. It is a whisper of a hint, a shadow of a clue. But what does it mean? Is an external device drawing power from the line itself? The engineers say this is impossible without a physical connection, and the divers have proven there is no physical connection. The data is a paradox. The investigation is a failure. The teams from the capital have torn apart the hardware, interrogated the personnel, and swept the ocean floor. They have found nothing. They have spent millions of rubles and thousands of man-hours. The only result is a collection of contradictory data and a rising sense of dread. The ghost remains at large. The silence on line K-12 continues, a constant, mocking reminder of their impotence. The machine does not crash, it writes itself. And it was writing a story of their complete and utter failure. The High Command demands answers. The task force, under immense pressure, must produce a theory. They are trapped. The data makes no logical sense within their existing technological framework. So, they begin to construct theories that exist outside of it. They attempt to fit the inexplicable facts into their worldview, stretching logic and physics to their breaking points. This is the birth of the phantom. The first theory is the most plausible, if technologically fanciful. It is called the remote induction hypothesis. The analysts propose that the adversary has developed a revolutionary new sensor. This sensor, they theorize, can read the faint magnetic field generated by the electrical signals inside the cable from a significant distance. They imagine a spy satellite in a special orbit or a high-altitude reconnaissance aircraft flying a constant patrol. This hypothetical sensor would be a breakthrough on par with the atomic bomb. It would render all shielded communications obsolete overnight. It was a terrifying thought. It was also wrong. The magic bullet fallacy takes hold of their thinking. They are searching for a single, miraculous piece of enemy hardware. They cannot conceive of a systemic advantage. Their entire industrial and military philosophy is based on building bigger guns, faster missiles, and thicker armor. They see technological progress as a linear path of bigger, better objects. The idea of a distributed network, of a software advantage, of a philosophical leap in how to approach a problem. This is alien to their way of thinking. They are looking for a new type of spear, not realizing the enemy has invented the net. A second theory emerges from the more imaginative, or perhaps more desperate, members of the task force. This is the microdrone hypothesis. They postulate that the adversary has deployed a tiny, autonomous submersible, no larger than a man's hand. This drone, they imagine, is constructed of non-metallic composites, making it invisible to their magnetic detectors. It would be acoustically silent, powered by a long-life battery. It would have attached itself to the cable like a leech, using a miniaturized induction reader to siphon off the data. This theory is pure science fiction, beyond their own engineering capabilities. But it explains the lack of evidence. A non-metallic, silent drone would be nearly impossible to find. They were imagining a hawk trying to catch a rat in a burrow, but the rat was a ghost. A third theory is far more insidious and requires no technological leap. It is the human betrayal hypothesis. This theory posits that there is no ghost in the machine. The ghost is a man, a high-level mole, located within the Peninsula Command bunker or the submarine base itself, is simply transmitting the data to the enemy through a covert channel. This is the Directorate's preferred theory. It is a familiar demon. They know how to fight traitors. They know how to interrogate, intimidate, and eliminate. It is a problem they can solve with their existing tools. This theory triggers a vicious internal witch hunt. The Directorate's security officers descend upon the naval base. Loyal, long-serving officers are subjected to grueling interrogations. Technicians have their lives and backgrounds torn apart. A cloud of suspicion settles over everyone. Trust evaporates. Communication breaks down not because of a technical fault, but because of a human one. The base's operational effectiveness plummets. Men are looking over their shoulders, wondering if their comrade is a spy. The phantom in their minds is now doing more damage than any real enemy device ever could. A fourth, unspoken theory festers in the darkest corners of the investigation. It is the theory of paranormal espionage. When all logical explanations fail, the human mind turns to the illogical. Whispers begin of the adversary's experiments with psychic phenomena. Could they be reading the minds of the cipher clerks? Could they be using remote viewing to see the messages as they are typed? This is the final stage of intellectual collapse, the moment when a rational, scientific state apparatus abandons reason and succumbs to superstition. They have been so thoroughly outmaneuvered that they have begun to believe their enemy is magic. They were wrong. They were profoundly, dangerously, and completely wrong. Based on these flawed conclusions, the High Command issues a series of futile countermeasures. To combat the remote induction theory, engineers are ordered to increase the electromagnetic shielding on the K-12 cable. This involves wrapping sections of the cable in experimental alloys, a hugely expensive and difficult undertaking in the deep sea. The only result is a degradation of their own signal quality, making communication more difficult. They are effectively jamming themselves. To counter the microdrone theory, the Navy implements a program of cable scraping. They design a crude device, essentially a large, weighted rake, and drag it along the length of the cable, hoping to dislodge any attached device. This medieval solution damages the cable's outer armor in several places, requiring costly repairs and causing service interruptions. They are wounding themselves in their hunt for a ghost. The response to the human betrayal theory is the most destructive. Several promising officers and technicians are arrested and removed from their posts. Some are imprisoned. Some simply disappear. The real mole, who does not exist, is never found. The only outcome is the destruction of morale and the creation of an atmosphere of terror that cripples the Black Sea Fleet for years. They have brought a computer to a knife fight, and in their confusion, they have started stabbing each other. The enemy remains untouched, listening in perfect, undisturbed silence. While the Union's best minds were chasing phantoms in the Black Sea, the answer was being quietly filed away in a secure data vault in a dry, sun-bleached corner of the American desert. The answer was not a magic bullet. It was not a single invention. It was a system. It was a philosophy. It was the product of a completely different way of thinking about war. The solution had been born decades earlier, in the quiet halls of research laboratories and the noisy shipyards where a new kind of predator was being forged. The story begins not with a weapon, but with a question. In the early days of the Cold War, a brilliant and eccentric naval officer asked a simple question: how do you win a war without firing a shot? His answer was equally simple: you know everything your enemy is going to do before they do it. You turn their greatest strength, their secrecy, into your greatest advantage. He envisioned a world where information was the ultimate weapon, a laser beam of heavy metal replaced by a silent stream of data. This philosophy was the seed from which the Ghost would grow. The first pillar of this new philosophy was a machine. It was a nuclear submarine, but a kind the Union had never imagined. Their submarines were hunters, designed for speed and aggression. They were loud, powerful beasts of the deep. The adversary built a Ghost. This new submarine was designed for one purpose: to be invisible. Its hull was coated in a layer of anechoic rubber tiles that absorbed sonar signals like a sponge. Its reactor and propulsion systems were mounted on a massive, insulated raft, isolating their vibrations from the hull. It was designed not to chase, but to wait. It could hover motionless for weeks, a silent shadow in the crushing pressure of the abyss, its crew listening to the ocean's secrets. It was not a warship. It was a spy. The second pillar was the tool. The challenge of tapping a modern, armored submarine cable was considered insurmountable. Cutting the cable would be an obvious act of war. Even if you could expose the core, physically attaching a listening device would create signal fluctuations that would be instantly detected. The adversary's engineers approached the problem from a different direction. They did not try to break into the cable. They decided to listen to its ghost. Any electrical current, no matter how well shielded, generates an external magnetic field. This field is infinitesimally weak, a tiny ripple in the vast ocean of the Earth's own magnetic field. It was thought to be undetectable, lost in the noise. The adversary's engineers built a device that could detect it. It was not a simple induction coil. It was a massive, hinged collar, weighing several tons. It was brought to the seafloor in two pieces by the Ghost submarine and carefully clamped around the cable, its two halves locking together with hydraulic precision. Inside this collar was a series of incredibly sensitive magnetometers, bathing the cable in a sensor field. This was the tap. It did not pierce the cable. It did not draw power from it. It simply listened to the magnetic whispers that bled through the steel armor. The third and most important pillar was the brain. This was the true source of the advantage. Capturing the raw magnetic data was useless. It was a chaotic storm of noise. The signal from the cable was buried, a single voice in a stadium of 1 million shouting people. The solution was computational. On board the Ghost submarine was a powerful, custom-built digital computer. This machine was programmed with a revolutionary set of algorithms designed for one purpose: signal extraction. The computer worked in stages. First, it sampled the ambient magnetic field of the ocean for days, building a precise baseline model of the natural noise. Then, once the tap was in place, it began to subtract that baseline from the new data. It filtered out the predictable frequencies of the Earth's magnetic core, the spikes from solar flares, the hum of the planet itself. What remained was still noisy, but the signal was now stronger. The computer then analyzed the electrical signature of the Union's own communication technology, which had been painstakingly studied for years. It knew the exact frequencies, the packet structure, the voltage patterns. It built a digital filter, a key shaped to fit the precise lock of the K-12 signal. When the raw data from the tap was passed through this final filter, the result was magic. The storm of noise vanished. What emerged was a perfect, clean, reconstructed copy of the original signal. The computer then did one final, brilliant thing. It generated a subtle, inverse magnetic field around the cable, a form of active noise cancellation. This is what the Union's technicians had detected: the impossible perfection, the unnatural silence. The tap was so effective that it was actually cleaning up the signal on the line, removing the natural interference. The Ghost was not just a listener, it was a poltergeist, tidying the house while it haunted it. The data was then recorded onto massive magnetic tape reels, which were periodically collected by the submarine and delivered for analysis. The system was complete: a silent ship, a sensitive tool, and a brilliant brain. This was the weapon the Union never saw coming. They had built a fortress of steel and secrets, and the adversary had simply walked through the walls. The confrontation with the truth did not come from a brilliant deduction or a feat of engineering. It came, as it so often does, from a simple human failure. Years after the Ghost first took up its station on Line K-12, a mid-level analyst working for the adversary's naval intelligence service decided to defect. He was not a master spy. He was a disgruntled bureaucrat, a man who felt he had been passed over for promotion. In his briefcase, he carried not the grand plans for the system, but a handful of technical manuals and a single, grainy photograph of the tap being loaded onto the ghost submarine. This intelligence eventually found its way to the Directorate. At first, it was dismissed as a fabrication, a plant designed to mislead them. The photograph was blurry. The technical specifications seemed to defy physics. But one of the engineers from the original, failed Maelstrom task force saw something in the schematics. He saw a logic, a terrifying, alien logic that finally explained the impossible data he had collected years ago. The noise cancellation, the lack of physical intrusion, the perfect signal. It all made sense. The Phantom had a face. The report was sent to the highest levels of the Union's government. A meeting was convened in a cavernous, wood-paneled room in the heart of the capital. The heads of the military, the Directorate, and the industrial ministries gathered. The defectors' information was presented. The room was silent. It was the same sterile, chilling silence that had haunted Line K-12. The shock was not a single event. It was a series of cascading realizations, each more horrifying than the last. The first layer was technological. They stared at the blurry image of the ghost submarine. It looked like nothing in their fleet. It was bulky, slow, and unarmed. Their naval doctrine had no category for such a vessel. Their entire anti-submarine warfare strategy was designed to hunt fast, loud, aggressive attack boats. They had spent decades building a net to catch sharks, while a silent, invisible whale had been living in their backyard. They had been looking for a predator, but the enemy was a parasite. The second layer was industrial. An engineer from the Ministry of Electronics was asked if they could replicate the signal processing unit described in the defectors' documents. He looked at the specifications, the microprocessor architecture, the data storage density, the microscopic tolerances of the magnetometer sensors. He turned pale. He informed the committee that building such a device was not a matter of resources or priority. It was a matter of possibility. They simply could not do it. Their industrial base, a behemoth designed to churn out thousands of crude, rugged tanks and rockets, lacked the finesse. They could not manufacture the silicon with the required purity. They did not have the microscopic etching technology. They could not write the complex software. The microchip had defeated the smokestack. The third layer was philosophical. This was the most devastating blow. The realization that the adversary was not just ahead of them in a few key technologies. They were fighting a different kind of war altogether. The Union's high command had been fixated on throw weight, megatons, and tank divisions. They saw the world as a chessboard for pieces of heavy metal. The adversary saw it as a web of information. They had weaponized knowledge. The Union was trying to build a better sword, while the adversary was building a perfect die. They were not even in the same game. They had been checkmated before the first pawn was moved. A desperate, furious order came down from the very top of the state. Copy it. Screw for screw. It was a command born of humiliation and rage. If they could not innovate, they would imitate. The Union's vast, creaking military-industrial complex was ordered to build its own version of the ghost submarine and the tapping system. The project was given unlimited resources. The attempt was a catastrophic failure. They tried to replicate the anechoic hull coating, but their chemical engineering was not advanced enough. The tiles they produced were less effective and would peel off under deep-sea pressure. They tried to build a silent reactor, but their metallurgy could not produce components quiet enough. Their copy of the ghost submarine was twice as loud as their existing attack subs. It was a ghost that screamed. The attempt to copy the tap and its computer was even more disastrous. Without the ability to manufacture the microelectronics, they were forced to use larger, less efficient components. Their version of the tap was the size of a small bus and required its own dedicated power source. Their signal processing computer was a room-sized behemoth that could not come close to matching the elegant algorithms of the original. They had copied the hardware without understanding the soul, the software, the doctrine. They had built a scarecrow in the shape of a man. The humiliation was complete. They were not just technologically inferior. They were intellectually outclassed. The system had defeated them. The final scorecard is brutal. For nearly a decade, the adversary listened to every secret that flowed through Line K-12. They knew the readiness status of every submarine. They knew the patrol routes. They had the launch codes before the submarine captains did. They read the private communications of the Black Sea Fleet's commander. The entire southern flank of the Union's strategic deterrent was a hollow shell, its secrets laid bare for its enemy to see. The balance of power was an illusion, maintained only by the adversary's silent restraint. This specific military encounter was a symptom of a much larger disease. It was a preview of the systemic collapse to come. The Union's command economy, with its central planning and 5-year goals, was brilliant at producing immense quantities of steel. It could build thousands of tanks, guns, and ships, but it could not produce a microchip with the same elegance as a small, innovative company in a California valley. It could not foster the decentralized, creative thinking required to solve a problem like listening to a silent ghost. The system rewarded obedience, not innovation. It punished risk. And in the new war of information, the greatest risk was not to take one. The core lesson was not about submarines or cables. It was about philosophy. The Union's failure was rooted in a deep, systemic flaw. It was the flaw of a centralized, top-down system trying to compete with a decentralized, bottom-up one. They believed in brute force over information dominance. They chose imitation over innovation. They valued quantity over quality. They had built the world's most formidable suit of armor, only to be defeated by an enemy who targeted the mind of the man inside it. The legacy of this silent conflict shaped the future of warfare for decades. It marked the moment when the primary battle space shifted from the physical world to the electromagnetic spectrum. The great contests of the future would not be decided by the clash of armies on a battlefield, but by the silent, invisible struggle for information. The ability to know, to process, and to act upon data faster than the enemy became the new measure of military power. The Ghost on Line K-12 was the harbinger of a new age. The war was lost not in a flash of nuclear fire, but in the quiet, methodical hum of a computer in the cold, crushing darkness of the deep sea. It was lost in the minds of analysts who could not imagine a threat they could not see. It was lost in a system that had forgotten how to think. The great industrial giant, the monolith of state power, had been brought to its knees, not by a sword, but by a whisper.